Hello, good morning, everybody. I hope you can all hear me well. Uh, Very welcome to today's webinar, jointly organized by EDSO and GEODE on revenue regulation for electricity DSOs and exploration of 7 European frameworks. Actually, this is the title of our paper released in December last year that we have the pleasure today to present to you and together with all the experts from these seven countries that will be with us to guide you into our report. And maybe to start with some technicalities while colleagues are joining. You are all mute by default, as well as your cameras are off, so please keep this way. And so, and in case you have questions to our speakers, please, you should address them through the Q&A tool. And then specific questions to a country, we will take one after each presentation. However, more general questions or other questions, we will try to address them later on at the end of the event, and maybe, if possible, in some cases, the speakers themselves can reply through the Q&A to specific questions. And I think with that, I would like to introduce you, guide you into our report. I think it's a fact that Europe's energy transition cannot advance without modern, flexible, and investment-ready electricity distribution networks. Clearly, more renewables, the electrification of heating, transport, and industrial sectors are challenging us DSOs in a way that we are forced to deliver unprecedented reinforcements and digitalization of our electricity distribution grids, with investments that will imply 730 billion euros until 2040, as it has been said by the European Commission in the communication together with the published with the grid package. Then we all know here that being distribution operation a regulated business, revenue regulation is the policy instrument that determines whether grid investments happen and whether they happen at the needed speed and in time. And therefore, together, these two associations, EDSO and GEODE, agree to look at how 7 European Union national regulatory frameworks in Austria, Finland, Ireland, Italy, Poland, Spain, and Sweden support DSO's ability to plan, to finance, and to deliver these investments. If you move next, and this exercise has been done assessing how these already defined 7 principles for effective revenue regulation, already defined by GEODE a year before, how those are applied or not in practice in these selected countries. And with this exercise, we have identified best practices, but also implementation gaps and also some regulatory barriers. These 7 principles doesn't mean that one is more important than the other, or the 1 to 7 necessarily means an order. However, I would like to share with you that, normally those models with certain well-considered predictability really are more, let's say, in line to allow the investments to creating an investment framework for DSOs. And I think I'll pass the floor to Charles, if you move to the next slide, to explain you the methodology we have been using in our report.
Good morning. Thank you, Carmen, and good morning, everyone. Indeed, this was a joint project of EDSO and GEODE, and I think that working together, we really were able to draw upon a lot of experiences. And so what you see here are some, as a quick sort of what we called traffic light analysis of different countries, revenue frameworks assessed on each principle. Now, it's important to say that, first of all, that traffic light is only an at-a-glance analysis, and we really encourage people to look at the detail. There's a lot of subtlety and nuance behind this. And secondly, it shouldn't be seen as the green light meaning what we like and red light we don't like, but rather what we try to do is assess it upon principles that we think are good for the system and ultimately benefit the consumer, which is the energy consumer, which is what all of us who are in the energy system are working for. You see there as well, there are different regulatory periods analyzed because, of course, in each country, the regulatory period is different. And so it's important there to look at the regulatory period and know that that is the specific period. This analysis doesn't apply necessarily to other periods that could have quite different frameworks as things change. Of course, one of the factors there is long-term predictability. So indeed, too much change from period to period is something that can be a negative factor. With that, I think that's a nice way to segue into the next point, which is before we get really into some country by country analysis that really delves into the detail, which we'll hear from the country experts in just a few minutes. We in the paper have some sort of high level takeaways for regulation that we try to draw out from the experiences of the 7 countries to really look at what best practices are and really try to improve Europe's frameworks. It's not just about the 7 countries, but it's really about thinking about in all member states and even beyond in Europe, best practices for regulatory frameworks and what can really improve and deliver the energy system that we need. And so the first one there you see is anchoring regimes and multi-year cycles with pre-announced checkpoints and transparent methodologies. We really won't have the energy transition we need if predictability remains an exception rather than the rule. Predictable rules give investors confidence. We do need to have some flexibility to accommodate unforeseen developments, but having that right balance supports the efficient network evolution, helps maintain stable grid tariffs, and ultimately safeguards the resilience of the grid. Another takeaway that we have from looking at all of this, and I think this is, and let me also add here that these takeaways are something to think about as you look at specifics from each of the 7 countries. These are things that we drew out, and as we come to the end, and after we have the presentations of the 7 countries, it's good to think about this in terms of questions that you might have at the end. And so, in terms of keeping the asset base aligned with current prices and technical lives, it's very important. DSOs compete for funding. They compete for skilled personnel. They compete for resources. So having sufficiently attractive returns are essential for the long-term viability of their businesses. If we have declining weighted average cost of capital levels, what you see in the next point is to set the weighted average cost of capital from forward-looking market evidence that sustains at least a solid investment grade profile. So if we have declining weighted average cost of capital levels with rising operational risks, this can challenge grid financing and expansion. We really have to align the regulatory asset base with fair book or replacement values, ensure competitive WACC. That way, we'll have the investor confidence that we need to support sustainable network development. Another point here is to strengthen anticipatory planning within network development frameworks. Providing clarity on approval and cost recovery will allow proportionate flexibility in delivery. And I think this is also set for if we have that kind of anticipatory planning, we can have a lower cost investment than making those investments later when costs may be higher in terms of supply chain, when we don't have when we may have to change things without having the best planning, when we maybe have to backtrack. So having that right type of anticipatory planning and a framework for anticipatory investments is key. Moving towards more balanced treatment of capital and operating solutions is really essential, that kind of regulatory neutrality. It allows the DSO to have all kinds of technical solutions, whether they're OpEx or CapEx, on a level playing field, and that means the best decision is taken rather than a decision that's because of a bias towards one or the other. This will support a cost-efficient grid, an innovative and resilient grid. In terms of projecting liquidity through timely cost recovery and revenue adjustments, they should reflect real financing needs, avoid long delays in compensation or settlements. When parameters shift abruptly or asset-based valuations are frozen, approvals can drift, returns can fall below risk, financeability weakens, and project can ultimately stall. And the last takeaway we have here is incentivize sustainable innovation that delivers results. It's really important for the consumer, for the grid, that DSOs are incentivized to deliver that innovation, to deliver innovation that's sustainable, that helps us move towards our climate electrification goals. And so as well as to develop flexibility solutions, integrate advanced systems, and strengthen the grid. And so mechanisms that allow DSOs to recover some of that cost, to ultimately to get some benefit themselves from making these kinds of investments that will deliver tangible results to consumers and support the broader energy transition. So with that, I will turn it back to Carmen to introduce our first country speaker.
Thank you, Charles. So we move to Austria. So the presentations will follow the alphabetical order. And we have today with us Oliver Glockengieser, Head of Regulatory Affairs at Energienetzes Steiermark from Austria. So please, Oliver, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Charles. Thank you for the possibility to give you in the following 15 minutes a little bit of insight into the current regulatory system in Austria for electricity DSOs, and based on the principles defined on the DSO GEODE paper for revenue regulation. Yes, I'm the company, maybe Energienetzes Steiermark, it's in the middle south of Austria. It's the fourth largest network company in Austria, approximately 500,000 metering points electricity and 40,000 metering points for gas. Yes, I will focus on two principles, maybe with an addition to the competitive WACC and REB, but starting with the first principle is the long-term predictability, and I will show you how it's the implementation in Austria and how is the evaluation on the basis of this traffic light consideration and evaluation. Yes, and the second principle will be the efficient operations and safeguarding consumer interests. Next slide, please. Yes, starting with long-term predictability. I have to say we had at the beginning of the negotiation process for the current fifth period in 2023, we had major challenges for the DSOs connecting to the energy system transition in Austria, and we had to find regulatory solutions, and we needed a regulatory change of the former framework. The challenges were like in other DSOs in Europe, increasing capex. We have the largest grid investment cycle in Austria's history due to digitalization and the integration of the generation, the decentralized generation. We had huge increases in OpEx, also concerning to digitalization, concerning to the EU NIS directive, new legal requirements in Austria. We had high inflation. We have to build up in the revenue cost base, and we had already high efficiency targets after 4 periods incentive-based regulation since 2006. 2006 started the first period. Now we are in the 5th period, I told before, from 2024 to 2028. At the end of this intensive negotiation process, and it was a process with the National Regulatory Authority, A-Control, and the legal parties too, I think we find solutions together for that necessary regulatory change to build up the regulatory transition for the DSOs. The key elements I will tell you in the next bullet points on this slide. One of the key element is the new introduction of a WACC splitting approach combined with an efficiency based WACC. That means we have two WACCs, one WACC for the old legacy investments, the RRB, and we have a WACC for new investments. I will show you the details in the next slides, a few details. That was an important point because we have increasing interest rates during the period, and we have to build or reflect them into the WACC, a major point of the new system. Furthermore, we started with planned capex into the cost basis, the elimination of the so-called T-2 delay, starting with 2025. Also an important element concerning the cash flows and the equity rates for DSOs. Furthermore, we introduced new operation cost factors during the period. That means we tried to, with the regulatory authority, try to combine the long-term predictability with flexibility mechanism during the regulatory period. That means we have a rising costs through the integration, OpEx integration of this decentralized generation. We have increasing OpEx through inflation. We have increasing OpEx through the NIS directive for energy communities, and there we developed so-called operating cost factors to reflect the increasing OpEx basis during the period, and it's an add-on element in the regulatory formula. Maybe for interesting, you see the formula at the top of the slide. Furthermore, I think that's something new in Europe. We have not the inflation adjustment, so-called NP, network price index, a consumer price index adapted, not on the basis on T-2. We have a plan-based inflation adjustment, including roll-up. Also very important point to reflect the high inflation during the current period. The photo year is 2021, and from this photo year ongoing, we needed that adaptation concerning the inflation. And the last point is the new implementation of the OpEx research and innovation budget in the 5th period in the amount of 0.6% of controllable costs. Next slide, please. The evaluation concerning to the points I told that's on the slide, we decided to set the traffic light for this principle to green. You see it on the left, up on the slide. Okay, next slide, please. The competitive WACC splitting approach I told before. I think for DSOs the WACC is one of the most important things. It has to be to realize the transition, the energy transition for DSO. So we need a market-based regulatory revenues for DSOs, and that includes also a market-based setting of the WACC, of the return on capital. Is necessary in case of the long-term protection of network asset value. That's a very important long discussions with the regulatory authority. We need the protection of our network asset value in an economic meaning. Very important. And we have to compete as DSOs with other segments, with the generation, and therefore also a competitive returns are needed. Therefore, after really long discussions with NRA, the result was that WACC splitting. You see it there. We have the WACC for the old assets there on the table, on the blue table on the left, at the amount of 4.16% pre-tax. And we have, and that's the new element, the WACC for new investments updated every year. The components, you see the chart there in the middle, the risk-free rate, the debt interest rate, they are updated every year. And therefore, we had the chance that the increasing interest rate level is built up in the WACC for financing new investments. The current WACC for new investments 2026 is 6.11%. Due to the fact that the WACC for the old investments is really low, 4.16% is in the European challenge, really a low value. And therefore, it's not easy to reach the aim for the protection of the network assets. We set the traffic light for this principle to yellow from the Austrian system. Next slide, please. A little bit the details, you see it there. I don't, the time is not enough to go into the details of our benchmarking and the system for calculating the general and the individual productivity factors. But I only want to give you a few points of the system. We have a general Xgen in the amount of 0.4%, and we have an individual WACC. That means for when you are 100% efficient, you get a productivity factor in the amount of 0.4%. If you are at the minimum efficiency, you have 80 minimum efficiency. It's 80%, the minimum efficiency in Austria. You get, and that's a huge value, you get 3.32% annual efficiency productivity discount. When you see the details of the benchmarking system is the molds, it's a DAA, and we have a best of approach that's important concerning the cost basis. That's the best of obligatory capital costs and standardized capital costs. The conclusion of the slide is, you see it there in red, we had total efficiency reduction since the introduction of the revenue regulation in 2006, I told before, at the amount of 46%. That's really high, and it's in the meanwhile, it's not easy, or it's not for DSOs to reach that aims. In our meaning, it's too high, and that will be also for the coming negotiation process a big topic. Also to reflect the energy transition concerning decentralized generation in that model of the benchmarking efficiency analysis. Okay, last slide, please. Yes, you see it the chart before. I think it's really a good approach for evaluation and assessment of the different regulatory frameworks in Europe for the 7 countries. And to summarize, I have the 4 points. I think it's important a transparent negotiation process between NRR, the DSOs, and the legal parties. I think that was a good thing. We had intensive discussions, but we found solutions, and that's the important point, I think. It's not everything perfect. You see, it's not everything on green. It uh, mustn't be everything, every traffic light on green. But I think we need we have further developments and future improvements are essentials. We have a good basis, but we have new challenges coming through the DSOs concerning the financiability of assets, the equity rates, yes, and also the cash flow topic, and also you see it before the efficiency, the benchmarking system. And yes, we tried to go further on, tried to follow up that collaboration between regulators and DSOs, and I think that's a good way forward, and to find future adjustments should be aligned onto our defined 7 principles for revenue regulation. And the conclusion of the Austrian assessment of the regulatory system, I think it's the last sentence from my colleague from Netzburgenland, Pilar Barrera Gonzalez. It's a good sentence, I think. From current improvements in the current period, we want to go towards future ready regulation and to realize the regulatory transition in Austria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver, also because you make a perfect use of your time. And I would like to highlight your conclusions of the importance of a good dialogue between NRAs and DSOs, right? You said you discuss intensively, but you also reach good solutions for all sides, because I always say we are all in the same boat here.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. I don't see questions, which means we can, without more delay, go to the next presentation. We move up north to welcome our colleagues from Finland. I hope you're ready, right? This is going to be a shared presentation by Lasse Continent from Caruna and Osmo Sirto from Helen Electricity. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Osmo Sirto. I'm from Helen Electricity Network from the capital of Helsinki, Finland. And we are the third largest DSO in Finland. Go ahead, Lasse.
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and also welcome on my behalf. So my name is Lasse Konttinen. I'm head of strategy and regulation at Caruna. Caruna is the leading DSO in Finland, serving about 730 private and corporate customers, which is about 20% of the national market. And our grid area spans from the Baltic Sea to the Arctic Circle. So before I start to go through the presentation, I would like to thank EDSO and GEODE for arranging this webinar on the DSO regulation benchmarking. So I think this is very important because it's so rare to have like lots of experts together and really working out the differences between regulation. So our presentation is a highly instructive and I would say frankly cautionary tale of Finland. So let's dive into the first content slide. The transition to deeply electrified. Let's skip even one further. Yeah, this one. So the transition to deeply electrified future requires upgraded DSO infrastructure. We DSOs require two things from our regulatory environment: stability and financial sustainability. So long-term infrastructure needs long-term predictable regulatory conditions. The current Finnish regulatory regime is a stark reminder of the consequences of sudden regulatory changes. It's a story how prioritizing short-term political and tariff goals can severely damage the long-term viability of the grid itself. On paper, Finnish framework looks standard. Allowed revenue equals a regulatory asset base multiplied by WACC, plus performance incentives and pass-throughs like grid service and losses. From 2016 to 22, we had perfect setup. High quality grid service to customers with low grid tariffs in European context. Then the regulatory stability and predictability were severely damaged in 2022 and 2024. In 2022, DSOs were hit with announced mid-period regulatory regime change, which forced significant reductions to WACC and regulatory asset base. Those both hits lowered the industry relative annual revenue in double digits. But at the end of 2023, even bigger surprise was in order. Our NRA suddenly announced freezing of existing regulatory asset base and also future investments. It happened just 3 months before start of new 8-year regulatory regime, and the final regulatory methods were published just few days before the new regulatory regime started, and the financial impact was devastating. Firstly, long-term cash flow is simply insufficient for DSO operations, as depreciation no longer covers the required replacement investments. Secondly, DSOs are forced into increased reliance on debt while facing constrained dividend capacity, as the whole regulatory asset base is frozen below market value. This leads to vicious cycle for credit metrics. High financial costs and restricted access to capital. In a nutshell, we were handed a severe regulatory cash flow decline with rapidly growing peak power demands, which require high investment levels. On the following slide, I introduced the investment requirements and regulatory cash flow decline. So can I have the next slide, please? Yep. So this slide illustrates the disconnect between the regulation and reality. I will start on the right side on Caruna Espoo data regarding peak power development. So it's not a steady incremental growth, it's an explosion of demand driven by deep electrification. Massive and sustained capex is needed to build the capacity to triple the peak power demand. So regulatory framework shifts have effectively cut the financial legs from us just as we need to start running. Same trend appears also at the capital Helsinki through Helen Sähköverkko's data. Picture is just as alarming. Peak power in Helen is projected to double just in 6 years. So meeting this massive steps change in demand requires forward-looking investments today and actually already yesterday. So DSOs need to build the grid of 30s and 40s right now. And our regulatory environment freezes our assets and changes rules mid-game. It forces DSOs into reactive defensive financial posture, which is illustrated on the next slide. Can I have the next slide, please? Yep. I want to translate the 2024 regulatory regime change into hard euros. The chart provides an illustrated example of the allowed return for a single 100 million euro investment for 50 years. So allowed return is defined by WACC multiplied by regulatory asset base. You can clearly see the big gap between the allowed revenue on the market RAP versus the newly imposed frozen RAP. The lost cumulative revenue is about 2/3 of the market RAP when assuming 2% inflation and every 4-year revaluation of RAB. The worst thing is that the change is retroactive. It is not just the future investments, but all investments prior to 2024. So it's not like for the future, but also for the history. So that's quite a big hit when you go multiple years forward, as you can see. When you freeze the regulatory asset base below market value, you penalize the DSOs for investing. It sends a bad message to investors. Your capital is not safe here, and your returns will be capped regardless of inflation or market realities. So this is the exact opposite of the investment signal that Finland and Europe needs right now. So now I give floor to Osmo regarding innovation and flexibility.
The next slide. So Finland has incentives both for innovation and flexibility. As innovation incentives, we look at only few countries in Europe have this incentive. And Finnish NRA is the first and so far only NRA of implementing flexibility incentive. Of course, we look at that like innovation and flexibility can be incentivized in other incentives. But as a flexibility incentive, Finnish NRA is a forerunner. Both of these incentives are designed so that innovation and flexibility costs, they are pass-through items. And the total cap, the total maximum utilization is 2% of regulated revenue. However, these are not real incentives as they are pass-through items. So no increase in profit and no possibility of outperforming. However, we have set the traffic light to green because of the change in our operational environment. We really need both innovation and flexibility. We can go to the next slide. So now we conclude our Finnish case presentation. On the left side, we have the view of the regulatory framework. The regulatory cash flow is declining. And on the right, you see the change in the operational environment. Our investment needs, they are significantly rising. So this is the dilemma. The framework is going down and our operational environment has huge need in financing. So we conclude our presentation. If you have any questions, we are willing to answer them.
Thank you very much, both Lasse and Osmo. I don't see questions, but please, colleagues, if you see, let me know because it needs time to refresh sometimes. And we missed a question for our Austrian colleague before, which is now in the Q&A. I don't see questions for Finland by now, but please, colleagues, have a look to the Q&A. Maybe it comes later. That means we can move to Ireland. Actually, hello, good morning.
Hi.
Joe Lawler, Finance Manager at ESV Networks. And please, the floor is yours to guide us into your revenue regulatory model in Ireland, please.
Thank you very much indeed, and good morning, everybody. Can you move past that slide, please? So I am representing ESB Networks. ESB Networks is the national DSO for Ireland. We have about 170,000 kilometres of distribution network and about 2.5 million customers. So that's our context. While this paper was being done, this paper was poorly timed from our behalf, or it was a little difficult for us in some ways to address, as we were in the process of concluding our price review. So we were in the middle of intensive negotiations and discussions as this paper was being published. I have the two on the right hand side, and I'll come on to those, but just maybe to just comment on a couple of these boxes here, if I may. The concept of anticipatory investments is not part of the Irish regulatory framework. And just in relation to our Finnish colleagues there, we do get indexation on the RAB. So we are in some ways in a far better place from that regard. I will just move on, if I may, and I'll be touching on probably all of these points as we go through. So we do have, as our Austrian colleagues said, we're also in a similar time frame for regulation. Our first price review was in the early noughties, and we're now on price review 6. We have had consistently 5-year price reviews. The only real surprise or shock we had was post our economic issues in the late, so in the early 2010s, when there was a mid-price requirement and a reset. So that is, we do have long-term, predictable, and very transparent sort of regime. So this price review, and similar to the themes that have already been mentioned, is the largest investment in the history of our country and our electricity network. And it's driven by all the various things that have already been alluded to. We have lots of customer growth. We are seeing extreme increases in peak demand in particular, not overall consumer demand, but peak demand is a particular technical challenge for our network. Also, the speed of the energy transition, it's been slow, it's been fast, it's been a challenging sort of space. We're also living with a lot of issues around supply chains and general macroeconomic challenges for us. And then the final piece is we're competing very much for capital and skills. So the comments that were made by our Finnish colleagues in relation to cash, access to investment and everything else are absolutely exactly where we have been over the past year. So our regulator has taken our regulator is the Commission for Regulation of Utilities. It regulates electricity, gas, and water across the country, and they have approved a very significant increase in our investment program. And I suppose the way that we approach it, I'll possibly come on to it a little bit more, but we submitted 7.5 billion, which is relative to our previous price review of 3.8 billion. So about 100% increase. And what the regulator has done, I'll come on to it a little bit, is they've approved all of that in principle to allow us to drive on and deliver this program, addressing all the various needs, but has provided a 2-tier framework to allow us to invest a certain amount in base, and then created a framework to allow us to access the rest through a series of reopeners and volume drivers. So our objective, as I'm sure all our colleagues here, is to deliver the full work program in the most efficient and financeable way, delivering a fair return and delivering something for everything for customers. So that is our framework, and we have a very significant challenge ahead of us. Next slide, please. So our WACC is pre-tax real. It's set for 5 years. Our current WACC is 3.8. We went in with 4.27. We had at the time of the paper 3.85, so that's what you'll see in the paper. But we actually got 4% in the end. And what changed in the meantime? There was changes to the risk-free rate, and possibly aligned to something that the Finnish colleagues alluded to. There was a little methodological change for how they want to do it. So as the cost of debt is increasing, there's more of a weighting on the future investments for the RAB as opposed to the embedded and pre-existing assets. So that's something new for us, but I thought that might be just notable in terms of the methodology. The methodology in general has been very transparent. It's been very consistent. We haven't had any of anything that, although we've had some very difficult conversations, the methodology has remained largely unchanged for the past few price reviews. Something also that in the context of cash flows and ensuring that we can fund and finance and source the required monies to support the program, our regulator, and I thought this might be interesting to colleagues, has introduced a side RAB effectively for increases in working capital. So with such an increase in investment in both distribution, and we have a fivefold increase in transmission because we're also the transmission asset owner for the country. We are seeing very significant levels of stock, and funding that and financing that is a real challenge for us. And the regulator, following our submission and evidence of what might be required, actually accommodated us by giving us a sidebar RAB with a return on that, which effectively is adding 0.14 to the headline WACC. But really, it's to address the cash flow issues and the challenges that I'm sure everybody else is facing. But it's something that's new to us. We're not aware of it anywhere else, and I thought it might be of interest to just run through it briefly there. Next slide, please. So in terms of efficient operations and safeguarding consumer interests, so I mean, we're just out of the price review. We have been deemed efficient. We have high level efficiency targets, but we also have specific efficiency objectives within individual regulatory allowances. So we have a mixture of efficiencies within our framework. So the Agile Investment Framework that's been introduced is really to ensure that the investment is being delivered before there's any impact on the customer. So if we have a run rate and we've delivered almost 4 billion in the 5-year period between 21 and 25, what the regulator, and rightly so, wants to ensure is that if we're going to expand our CapEx particularly significantly, that the customer is only going to pay for what is actually going to be delivered. So we have a series of principles that we're using. So our base case is fully approved, and in principle, the high case or the needs case that we've submitted is also approved. However, we have to go through a reopener process, submitting it on an annual basis into the regulator, but they will place reliance on our own corporate governance and business cases in order to facilitate that. So if the work and the program and the project that we've identified is the same one as what was in the 7.5 billion original business case, they will approve that in principle. And what happens is we have an annual price tariff process, and that can be accommodated, that additional capital investment can be accommodated in that. So what that is doing is allowing us to operate at a very high baseline and to seriously attack the very ambitious system requirements and CapEx needs over the next 5 years. And the customer will only pay when we're in a position to actually deliver that, and we do deliver it. So that's the way that it's done. From a financing and a cash flow perspective, that creates very significant challenges. How do we ensure that we have sufficient financial strength to deliver that, given the scale of that? And there's another 6 billion on the transmission side. So as a company, we have a considerable challenge there. So we have required an equity investment. We are state owned, and the state has invested money in us. And there are, as I alluded to earlier, there are side RABs, and there are other little things that need to be considered. In addition, they have also given us a commitment that if financeability and funding is becoming a significant challenge, they haven't preset what that challenge might look like, but they are open to that discussion in order to protect, as well as the colleague said, the investment grade profile that's required to deliver a CapEx program of this scale and ambition. So next slide, please. This is my final slide. We do also have a very broad range of incentives and penalties. This is across the 18. There's 18 across transmission and distribution, 13 are distribution, 5 are transmission. And relative to the size of, because the program has increased, the pot has increased as well. And there is increased focus on delivery-focused incentives around continuity, planning, project management, and various what you'd expect from customer-facing incentives around continuity, around customer satisfaction, around times to connect, times to quote. Vulnerable customer is a new one for us. So there's a whole suite of very challenging incentives and penalties in there. In financial terms, they have not, similar to the Finnish colleagues, they have not been a financial boon. They haven't been material to us in the great scheme of things. We do well in in many incentives and we do not so well in others, which is what you would expect given the challenging nature of how it's set at the time. And in the report, it's flagged as an orange and probably will remain so. We did have significant funding and financial concerns about the level of the targets as we were having negotiations. That has been assuaged somewhat, not in the level which the targets have been set, but rather the introduction of financial deadbands, which have minimized both the reward and the penalty that might impact on us, while not lessening the focus on actually delivering the targets. And the final piece there on that mechanistic incentives, what we do find with incentives is if we've come through PR5 was our first batch of incentives that we dealt with the regulator, and a number of them were on a balanced scorecard basis. And that proved somewhat problematic to both implement and for the regulator to measure in many regards. So that's moved to a more mechanistic incentive so that both parties are clear on what's been achieved and frankly what's not been achieved as well. So that's really that's my set of slides. We have a very ambitious and challenging few years ahead. The themes are exactly what's already been alluded to and outlined by our other European colleagues. And our key challenge is to deliver critical infrastructure, which is a major political item in Ireland, and rightly so. So how to deliver that at pace while protecting both the service to the customer and affordability as we do so. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Joe. I think we all across Europe, DSOs, share this challenge that protected consumers while, and I really reproduce your words and text in the slides at a time where large investments needs require fundamental change in the approach to deliver both pace and scale at a time of significant uncertainty. And I think this, with the different formulas being applied across Europe, is a reality. Thank you very much. I see we have a little bit of time, and I see in the Q&A no specific questions, or at least not yet, because it takes a bit of time for colleagues to think on the questions. But I see a question about Finland, so the previous country. Are Finnish colleagues with us to reply? Yeah,
Yes.
I see Osmo. The question, I read it, it says, when referring to frozen regulatory asset base, you mean that the regulator decided to stop the re-evaluation of existing assets?
Yes,
that's correct. So they will just freeze everything prior to 2024 to the price level of 24. So it will never improve these old historical assets. And then for the future assets, every year is frozen based on the NRA assessment on proper price level for those investments. And we get this information at the end of the period. So in a sense, we have now invested 2 years already, and we get the information of our investments at the end of 2027. So it's like a backwards kind of a thing that they then tell us that what were the values for the RAP for those investments.
Thank you, Lasse. And I see also a question for our Austrian colleague. Oliver, are you still with us?
Yes, of course, Carmen.
Perfect. So
I have already answered in the F&A. I think it was a question from Sarah Fanta, I think.
Indeed, yes. Okay, now I see it. Yeah, good. But maybe we can share with colleagues. The question says, the reduction of efficiency is based on the increasing share of renewables in the distribution grid?
Yes. No, that's not the result of the increasing share of renewables. In Austria, we had a continuous increase in average efficiency since the start of the incentive-based regulation in 2006. The topic of the share of increasing share of renewable energy or the renewables energy generation in the distribution grid is a topic for the next period to reflect these in the output of the new benchmarking analysis. Maybe Sarah referred to the minus 46% on the slide. That's the value of the total efficiency reduction since the introduction of the revenue regulation in 2006. That's the full amount of efficiency reductions for an average efficient DSOs. But in these years, we had a continuous reduction of the X-gen. We started with approximately 2% per year. As you have seen before, now we are at 0.4%, and we have a continuous increase of the average efficiency from DSOs. At the moment, for the current period, we have an average efficiency for all DSOs. We have only, that's also a specialty in Austria, only 38 DSOs electricity in the benchmarking sample, and these DSOs have an average efficiency approximately about 95%.
Thank you very much. So I think with that, we might come later to Erlenbach, but no questions by now. We move then to the south. I welcome our experts from Italy. Again, a double share presentation. So good morning to Riccardo Abate from Energrids, and also Giacomo Maggiore from Unareti, both from the regulatory affairs of the respective companies. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Carmen, and good morning to everybody. I'm Giacomo Maggiore. I work in A2A as a regulatory affairs specialist. Unareti is the DSO of A2A Group and operating gas and power distribution in the north of Italy. Today with Riccardo, who works on similar topic, I think, in Energrid, we will discuss about two topics related to Italian approach and experience related to anticipatory investments and as first, and then Riccardo will focus on the role, on the approach of Italian regulation of ROS model. You can go to the next slide, maybe. Yes, the Italian regulation is known for its stability, predictability, and transparency, thanks to long regulation period and structured public consultation. Also considering that the current regulation cycles cover the period between 2024 and 2031, it is divided into two sub-periods. In this framework, the WACC is set in advance for 6 periods with annual update mechanism called the trigger. At the same time, we have in Italy the regulation that provide RAB adjustment year by year through, in order to protect the value of investment and support financial sustainability of network operation, regulation providing an adjustment of RAB through inflation. In this perspective, is also important to see and remark that Italian regulation also have a specific incentive for strategic investment. This is the starting point to discuss the role of anticipatory investment. If you can switch the slide, maybe, okay. As I was saying before, the regulation is a specific approach to define the role of specific incentives for strategic investment, such as the network reinforcement, the increase of capability to react to the increase of renewable energy, the increase of an improvement of resilience, and the support of electrification. These investments are and must be included in the network development plans and are evaluated through cost-benefit analysis. If we look to the Italian electricity network, we see two different dynamics. On one side, there are still significant territorial differences in network infrastructure in itself. But on the other side, we are seeing a rapid growth of distributed power production, energy communities, and new electric loads. This is because the becoming what we are seeing is that we have to face two different situations, and in this perspective, what is asked is to have a proactive network, not a reactive one. This means that the grid should not respond to a current request, but also has to be able to and prepare to face future needs. This is the idea behind the anticipatory investment. These investments have to be defined and discussed before the demand actually appears, and are based on a reliable forecast of network development for the future electricity demands. The goal of the investment have to avoid congestion, bottlenecks, and connection delays. According to the development and the change that the Italian grid has to face, also considering the difference in morphological and the development of the grid itself. In fact, what is very important is also the final aim of anticipatory investment, which is to ensure that the network should be ready to support the evolution of energy system itself. But this is the most critical point, is that anticipatory investment are not regulatory defined or are not specifically regulatory defined. However, in practice, these investments are already allowed and recognized in tariff, even because ARERA, the regulation, follows a pragmatic and flexible approach. Anticipatory investment, even if are not regulatory defined, can be carried out if they are included in network development plans and supported by cost-benefit analysis that demonstrate their technical and economical value. This means that even without a formal definition, anticipatory investments are already fully operational in the Italian regulation framework. This is because the regulator feel the necessity to have a proactive electrical grid, and DSOs have to act in advance without waiting for a formal regulatory update in order to face and be able to respond in time to the request of grid development. All the incentives that ARERA recognized are related to specific topic, and in fact this topic are mainly oriented to the necessity to have a flexible and capable grid in order to respond in time to the possible requests of grid development itself. All these elements show that anticipatory investments in Italy are already supported through incentives and strongly aligned with the network planning. More generally, even if anticipatory investments are not formally defined, they are fully enabled by the regulatory framework through network planning and cost-benefit analysis. This means that even if there is not, as I said before, a precise regulatory definition, anticipatory investments are in a certain way recognized even if, or better, are in a certain way recognized if included in the development plan supported by cost-benefit analysis and if in line with the developments of network planning. In this perspective, what appears more interesting is the fact that this definition of anticipatory investment is totally in line with the ROS-TOTEX model, where this investment fit naturally and can be used, or better, can fit, can be adjusted and more how to say these investment can fit, okay, fit naturally thanks to the distinction between slow money and fast money. They are not totally, they can be divided totally in capex or opex, but their affect, their structure, better, their structure remove the traditional bias through capex and allow DSO to adopt flexible solutions, which are more often the most effective tool for anticipatory action. Riccardo, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. The next slide, please. Hi, so thank you. Good morning. I'm Riccardo Abate from Enel's regulatory team, and I deal with the tariff regulation of e-distribuzione. That is the main Italian DSO, serving around 85% of the Italian customers. So I will introduce how the Italian ROS regulation ensures a balanced incentive between capex and opex. So first of all, ROS stands for regulation by expenditure and service targets, and the forward-looking framework introduced by the Italian authority in 2024 for distribution service, and cover a regulatory period lasting until 2031. It is basically a TOTEX approach, where the overall expenditures of the DSO are divided between two components through a notional capitalization rate. One is the slow money, and the second one is the fast money. So we can say that the slow money represents the capitalized share of TOTEX, and as such it is added to the RAB and remunerated over time through WACC and depreciation. While the fast money is in a way the complementary part of the slow money, so is the non-capitalized share of TOTEX, and as such it is recognized in the year in which the expenses occurs. Moreover, the amount of fast money each year is adjusted considering an efficiency mechanism on OPEX, determined by taking into account the difference between the regulated OPEX baseline set by the authority and the actual OPEX of the DSO. Thus, it operates both as a reward or penalty mechanism, depending if the actual OPEX are lower or higher than the baseline set by the regulator. So the essential part of this regulation is this notional capitalization rate, because this is the parameter that define the amount of TOTEX that is remunerated, let's say, like CAPEX, so through WACC and depreciation, or like OPEX, not the current spending on CAPEX or OPEX of each year of a DSO. So this notional capitalization rate is defined ex ante by the authority, and it is based on a mix of historical and prospective forward-looking data of CAPEX and OPEX provided by the DSO to the authority. And it is updated every 2 years by the authority, thanks to the new data that the DSO provides. So by doing so, each DSO is encouraged to adopt the most efficient solution between CAPEX and OPEX, as any potential CAPEX bias is removed. This represents a significant change compared to the previous regulation in force before the year 2024, that was basically an hybrid between a price cap regulation on OPEX and a rate of return on CAPEX. So in the past, having two different regulations in place for CAPEX and OPEX, there was in some degree of difference incentive to provide solutions through CAPEX or OPEX, but this is no longer the case with the ROS regulation. Moreover, the ROS regulation contributes to address the sufficient cash flow mechanism principle that we included in this paper by ensuring a stable and predictable cash flow profile, supporting DSOs in managing the investment needed to support the energy transition. Next slide, please. The ROS regulation is still evolving, including with the respect to its ability to provide incentive both for CAPEX and OPEX expenditures. As I mentioned before, the current regulatory framework already provides an efficiency mechanism on OPEX based on the difference between actual OPEX and the baseline set by the authority. but starting from 2026, the regulation further expands its scope through a 2 years experimental phase. And during this phase, DSOs are required to prepare a business plan based on their TOTEX forecast and to carry out a cost assessment comparing the forecasted expenditures of the business plan with the historical and actual realized costs. And in addition, a reward and penalty mechanism has been introduced on the degree of accuracy between the CAPEX forecast in the business plan and the actual CAPEX realized by the DSO ex post. And also an optional incentive mechanism has been introduced for specific investments in the form of a sharing of efficiency gains comparing the historical average cost or international benchmarks. And moreover, a general efficiency mechanism on the overall amount of CAPEX may be introduced in the future after the conclusion of this 2 years experimental phase. So we put the green light on the ROS regulation because it's allow for DSO autonomy, responsibility, and accountability because the business plan is defined by the distributor considering the system needs, while ensuring also higher accountability for the business plan itself. And also it's allow higher revenue predictability thanks to this a multi-year planning framework directly affecting the recognized revenues. So this is my presentation. I don't know if you have any question of this on the topic of ROS.
Thank you very much to both of you, Riccardo and Giacomo, for your presentation. Let's refresh, but I don't see particular questions to you. Okay, so thank you. Then I see one hand raised, by the way. Let's see. By Tom House. Hello. It's a question for Italy. Okay, so please, if colleagues can unmute you so you can raise the question. Now, we cannot hear you.
You should.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, now perfect.
Great. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Just a quick last question on this last slide. Does the fact that you have an efficiency mechanism on OPEX but not on CAPEX, does that have any effect in terms of disincentivizing OPEX expenditure?
I mean, if you're talking about the TOTEX perspective, I think it's true that at the moment, until we introduce the efficiency mechanism also on CAPEX, we can say that it's not a complete framework. So it will become a fully TOTEX model, as said by the Academy, in a way, after the full implementation of the mechanism also on CAPEX for sure. So it's still evolving to become a full TOTEX model in a way, yes.
Thank you.
So yes, there is some degree of difference intensive at the moment because there are incentives also on CAPEX, but they are different from the one in place for OPEX. So until they become the same in a way, there are still some different incentives on the two CAPEX and OPEX.
Thank you. So I think with that we can move east, and I invite our colleague from Poland to take the floor. Welcome, Karolina Blaszak-Lasota from Energa Operator.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Carmen, good morning. Thank you, Carmen, for this introduction and for the opportunity to take part in this webinar. It was very interesting to listen to the previous speakers. My name is Karolina Blaszak-Lasota, how you said correctly, and I'm the head of finance and regulatory affairs in Energa Operator. Energa Operator is one of the 4 largest DSOs in Poland. And now, next slide, please. I would like to start my presentation by saying that Poland is facing major challenges related to energy transition. At the same time, the scale of plant investment is very significant. You might be wondering how significant this is. Let me explain. By 2030, the transmission system operator and distribution system operators plan to invest almost 40 billion euro in the energy sector in Poland. But what does it mean for us, my company, other DSOs, and of course for our customers? Well, on the one hand, our tariff system must support the financing of this investment. But on the other hand, it must also protect customers from sharp increases in electricity bills. And both of these aspects are very important for us, protecting our customers and supporting the necessary investments. That's why today I would like to explain how the regulatory model for DSOs works in Poland and present the strong and weak side of our model. First, I'm going to show you the historical background of the regulatory model. Then I will say a few words about the key factors that determine regulated revenue, focusing on two principles of the report. One is the competitive WACC and RAB, and the second is the balance between CAPEX and OPEX. Finally, I will conclude with some reflection on the future direction and possible development of our tariff model. Let's start our journey about the Polish tariff model. And now, next slide, please. Until 2020, Poland had a multi-year tariff model. It was relatively stable and predictable. After COVID-19 and later the war in Ukraine, the market situation became very unstable. Because of that, the Polish regulator moved to one-year tariff periods. That's why today the Polish model can be described as a hybrid model. But why do we call it a hybrid model? On the one hand, the model still has some long-term elements, especially in the area of investment and cost of capital, such as WACC. On the other hand, tariff decisions are taken every year because revenue is approved annually. In practice, this means that DSOs know they allowed revenue only for 1 year ahead. This gives DSO short-term visibility and makes long-term planning more difficult. Now, let's look at how regulated revenue is built. As you can see on the slide, some elements are related to investment, like RAB and WACC, and some are related to costs, like, for example, OPEX. Now, let's move to the next slide. Next slide, please. Let's start with the investment side of tariff revenue and focus first on WACC, which should provide long-term stability for DSOs. The Polish regulator understood that DSOs need stable conditions to finance investments. That's why, at the end of 2022, the Energy Regulator Office signed with DSOs the so-called Chart for the Effective Transformation. This document was very important for DSOs in Poland. But why was it so important? This document introduced a guaranteed WACC pre-tax at the level of 8.478% for the years 2023 to 2028, as long as the goals related to the energy transition are achieved by DSOs. In practice, this mechanism guarantees a certain level of WACC until 2028. And it also reduces regulatory risk and make investment in the energy transition more stable. At the same time, DSOs can also negotiate an additional reinvestment premium, but only during the annual tariff process. So, in practice, the real WACC may be higher than the guaranteed level defined in the Charter for Effective Transformation. But, as I said before, as long as the goals related to the energy transition are achieved by DSOs in Poland. Now, that we know how WACC is calculated, we can move on and talk about RAB, which is the base used to calculate the return on capital. RAB is updated every year. The value of RAB changes because of new investment, depreciation, grants or connection fees, difference between planned and real investment for 2 years back. The most important point here is that when RAB increases, the base of calculating the return also increases. This means the model supports the growth of regulated assets. And because the value of RAB grows mainly thanks to investment, CapEx, the next topic we should look at is CapEx and investment planning in the Polish tariff model. DSOs in Poland prepare 6-year development plans, which are updated every 2 years. These plans show the maximum level of investment that can be later be included in the tariff. In other words, the development plan defines the maximum level of CapEx accepted by the regulator. This plan also sets the main direction of network development. The 6-year development plan focuses on improving network reliability, REST connections, replacement of old assets, network cabling, and last but not least, digitalization and automation. From 2026, projects that fall into the priority category, such as smart metering, digitalization, network automation, may receive additional regulatory premium. However, Poland still doesn't have a formal system to reward anticipatory investments, meaning investment may before demand appears. This may limit the ability of the network to manage future RES growth and electrification. So far, we have discussed the investment side of the model. Now let's move to the next slide and talk about the operational side of our tariff model OPEX. Next slide, please. The OPEX budget is set every year based on historical data from 2 years before and indexed by inflation. In theory, this mechanism is mathematically correct. However, in practice, it often underestimates real operating costs. As a result, we observe what is called the OPEX gap. The OPEX gap means that the real operating costs are higher than the cost accepted by the regulator in the tariff. But why the Polish DSOs have the OPEX gap? There are 2 main reasons for this. First, the OPEX used in tariff is based on historical cost from 2 years before and, how I told you, indexed by inflation. However, a large part of operating cost, OPEX, are wages, and wages are currently growing faster than inflation in Poland. Second, the calculation of OPEX is based on historical data, but the market is changing. DSOs today need new services and capabilities that didn't not exist in the past. This is especially visible in areas such as cybersecurity, new IT service, and digital skills. It is also important to know that from the 2026 tariff year, the regulator recognized that wages are growing faster than inflation. As a result, part of the wage growth has been included in the tariff, but only a part. This is a positive step in the direction of adapting the model to the market realities. However, OPEX is still based on historical data and approved only for 1 year. There are also discussions about returning to cost benchmarking for DSOs in Poland, which was used before 2021, and introducing regulatory targets, goals to reduce OPEX. In practice, this could put additional pressure on OPEX in Poland. And this leads us to the next point, the balance between CAPEX and OPEX, one of the principles. The current Polish model supports CAPEX more than OPEX. In practice, this means that current models support building new assets more than operational spending. For CAPEX, the mechanism is quite simple. CAPEX increases the value of RAB and generates a guaranteed return thanks to WACC. OPEX works differently. OPEX grows mainly with inflation, based on historical data, and may not fully reflect real operational needs. Also, DSOs have limited flexibility to move costs between CAPEX and OPEX. If a project is classified as OPEX, part of the cost may not be fully covered in the tariff, especially if these costs weren't present historically. From a regulator perspective, CAPEX is more predictable and safer than OPEX. So, having analyzed the main elements of the model, now we can summarize its strong and weak side of the model, of our model. Let's move to the next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. According to DSO and GEODE report, the Polish model received yellow light. I see you. Okay, the yellow light, meaning it is stable but not perfect. In my opinion, this is a very accurate assessment. On the one hand, the model has several solid foundations, such as guaranteed WACC until 2028 and 6-year development plan. On the other hand, several challenges are still visible. The 1-year tariff period, the preference for CAPEX over OPEX, the OPEX gap, no formal support for anticipatory investment. So, what does it mean for the future of DSOs in Poland? And now let's move to my last slide. Thank you. The model worked well during the crisis period. However, the energy transition is accelerating, both in Poland and in other countries in Europe. Risk connections are growing, electrification is increasing, and networks are becoming more digital. In this situation, the model will need to be developed in the future. So, what should be the right direction for the tariff model in Poland? In my opinion, 3 elements are particularly important. A strong multi-year regulatory approach, a better balance between CAPEX and OPEX, more neutral treatment, a different technical solution, no matter if they are CAPEX or OPEX. So, this is what the tariff model in Poland looks like today, and the main challenges associated with it. I will hope that it was an interesting topic for you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for your presenting your stable but not perfect revenue regulatory framework in Poland. And I see also a shared concern, which is that the CAPEX is more rewarded than OPEX. This is something it happens in other countries as well, and it's probably not adequate with the challenges and the realities we are all facing nowadays. Thank you very much. Finnish colleagues, you have a question in the chat that maybe you can address. And with no delay, I move now Southern Europe with a presentation from Spain. I welcome our colleague Santiago Gallego. Santiago.
Good morning, Carmen. Can you hear me well?
Yes. Good morning. And now I can hear you and I can see you as well. So please tell us about what's going on in the regulatory framework in Spain.
Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to participate in this webinar. Thanks to of course to GEODE and EDSO for the support when drafting this interesting publication. I will take the floor on behalf of the Spanish team that you can see that is composed by Irene Bartol, who is the Secretary General of ASEME. ASEME is one of the three main associations of DSOs in Spain, and myself. I work for one of the largest DSOs in Spain, IDE, which is part of the Iberdrola group. I will start with the presentation, but of course Irene can jump in whenever she wants, and also will help me with for the answers. Yeah, then we can proceed with the first slide. So as you can read in the screen, we have the 7 principles, and then we have Spain, but we will be focusing in this case in 2 principles. One will be the anticipatory investments, and the other one is the competitive work and the regulatory asset-based concerns. We saw that other colleagues have already talked about these 2 principles, because we are like sharing the views and jumping from one for another. So it will be good to have the comparison within us for the public. So yeah, that's it. One first observation is that by the time we were drafting this, trying to work on this document, that was let's say last quarter of last year, there was another regulatory period in Spain, because the current one was approved in the last days of December. So and this document was published in advance, I mean some days ahead of the publication of the 3rd regulatory period in Spain. So we had to work with a mix of the existing regulation, but also taking a forward look. No, please go back. Yeah, we had to make to try to work also with the information we had from the new regulation that is currently being approved in Spain. So the presentation is focused on the 3rd period that started in January of this year and will last for 6 years, this year and 5 more. But when I said the report contains some information that has to be commented in this regard, because some changes were happening at the last days of the year. Now, yes, we can go to the next slide, please. So before going to the 2 principles I announced, I would like to start with some general observation that can help to set the context and to understand the context of we have these green lights for Spain. So as said, the new regulatory period for Spain started in January this year and will end in 2031. And the general observation is that this period is, this proposal is not aligned with the need of electrification that will be happening in the next years. Even if the regulation provides with some new mechanisms, try to innovate what we had previously, we consider that the prescriptions are not yet there when it comes to attract the capital, the needed capital in the right quantity. As everybody knows, the required investment effort that we have ahead is enormous, and we have concerns with that the investors could not be attracted in a sufficient way to provide capital to our business, and even considering the distribution business to Spain, because probably the rate of return in other countries are more attractive than Spain. That's the main concern, taking into account the huge electrification, the huge investment that will be needed in the next year. Also, a general remark is that there has, in Spain we had 3 regulatory periods with 3 different methodologies. That's something remarkable. This is not, could be good or bad, but at least one thing is that the adaptation period is very short. I have referred to the fact that we only knew the details of this methodology, the methodology we have now, the framework we have now, in the last days of last year, and then starting 2026 we had to work with the new framework. So yeah, there is a very even if the methodology has the framework has an adaptation period, the investment that we were doing in the first days of the year were not known in advance. So there is a lack of stability in the regard that can be improved in the next periods to come. Also, it's very important and relevant for us to consider that the OPEX has included a large initial haircut for this year, 13%, and from 2029 it will be increased, and the margin captured by the DSOs will be only the half of the results. So that in our opinion means that probably the DSOs won't have the proper incentives to go for the improvement of the OPEX in the terms that will be required. Also, we think that the rising network demands and the DSO responsibilities are not adequately reflected in the remuneration. The agents in general, the capital investors, but the DSOs of course, the system operators in general, but also the agents in the energy transition think that the framework does not fulfill the expectation that we were aiming, and also trying to have enough capacity, because one parallel thing that happened at the same time is that there were the publication of the hosting maps for capacity in Spain, and we could see that there are important constraints in terms of connecting. So the immediate solution is of course to build more infrastructure, substations, lines that can allow for more connections. That is one of the things that we are trying to achieve. And then finally in this slide, setting the WACC below the risk-adjusted levels undermines financeability. That's what I was as commenting in the first paragraph, in the first point. The WACC relates indeed to CAPEX investment. So the signal that DSOs have to invest in this CAPEX if the WACC is not good enough or adequate enough, then could contradict the needed efforts to invest. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the Spanish National Energy Climate Plan, PNIEC in Spanish, for the current period foresees more than 53 billion euro in grid investment. So this is a fact and a commitment coming from the institutions, in the Spanish institutions, and also in which we believe and we are also committed. So we as colleagues said in the previous, almost all the previous presentations, DSOs are facilitators to make possibly this transition, and we know that our role is to try to put the basis for it. So we think that the good framework is required to it. Before going down, I forgot to say that anticipatory investment, differently to other colleagues in other countries that say that was not recognized, we were glad to see that our regulator recognized it in the framework. So that is a very good point, and we want to recognize this because we now can work with this tool and try to include it in our development plans. And going to back to the points, the one of them is also very relevant in our country, different to other countries, that we have a cap in the annual investment for the time being, but it's going to be raised. There's a proposal to be raised in the next years, and then have this allocation or this possibility of allocate anticipatory investments that will be on top of the cap that we already have. So this is also a good proposal that we really welcome. Not so good is that, and I saw that some colleagues have not the same treatment in their countries, is that we only get the recognition for the investment for the year N in the N+2 year. That means that, for example, we now in 2026, we have to invest what we decided in 2024, because we have to present the plans, our development plans, early 2025. So and have to be approved, and then now we can start with the investment that we foresee 2 years ago. So then there is not a good visibility and then recovery in time to make that these anticipatory investments can be understood since the beginning. Next slide, please. And that's my last one, talking about the other principle, the competitive WACC and the regulatory asset-based concern. Here, as you can see, and unfortunately, the traffic light is red in the report, and even if this is the color that we choose, and as said by Charles at the beginning of the meeting, is not the aim of to criticize, but the aim is to send our opinion in what can be improved and can be also understood as a good practices for the future to come. So 1, 2 clarifications. As said, the WACC is 6.58 nominal pre-tax. This figure is not very far from what we had previously. That's true, but also is not less true that the effort that we have, and the investment we have ahead is much greater than we had in the past, and this is recognized also from in the presentation of some colleagues that we also wanted to have in our side. And also it's good, that is also a positive note in this regard, that the WACC is stable for the whole period. For the 6 years, there is not intermediate assessment foreseen, so that's also good. But having said that, I mean, still we think that is not in the right direction if we compare it to other sectors and also with other countries that have a good appetite for going very bluntly for the electrification. So just very briefly, because I see Carmen appearing, and that means that I have a few minutes to finalize. The regulated asset base is made of two components, two main components. One is the classical ones that are classified as audited costs, that does offer no risk because, I mean, if fulfilling all the criteria, then there are not check against standards or standard costs. But there is a part that is the electrification incentive, the electrification not incentive, but bunch of chunk of the investment. That means that we have to be efficient. We have to connect. Or have to have the power, the capacity contracted in time, and also have a K factor that will serve as the tool or the factor to incorporate this to the remuneration formula. That means that this factor that is not under control of the DSO can suppose that the investment is profitable or not for the DSO. And this is something that we have to take into account. The value of the K factor is 257 euro kilowatt, sorry, and then that sends the signal that then only the investments that are below this value can be, not making losses for the DSO in a way. And yeah, that's all from my side. I don't know if there is any comment from Irene, or we can leave it here. And of course, questions will come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Santiago, for sharing with us a model with lights and shadows. Still, despite being very recent, very new, keeping investment caps, and yeah, whether this is gonna support to attract the capital needed both in quantity and in time. Well, we'll see. And then I don't see questions to Spain in the chat, but have a look, Santiago, because in other cases they come a little bit later. So please have a look. And then I move up north. We have been traveling all around Europe, south, north, east, west. So our last country is Sweden. And I very much welcome Jonathan Hallinder, Head of Regulatory Affairs at E.ON Energy Distribution. So please, the floor is yours, Jonathan.
Thank you, Carmen, and thank you for having me. First of all, I'd say that I'm not the main author of this. It's been drafted together with Per Everhill from Tekniska Verken, which is a Swedish municipality-owned DSO. But as you said, Carmen, I'm representing E.ON, and we are on the Swedish side the biggest DSO for local and regional distribution, mainly based in the southern part of Sweden, but very much north compared to the previous speaker from Spain. We can move on one slide ahead. So yeah, before jumping into the 7 topics and the 2 main topics here, I'd just like to address a few things as some of the other speakers has done before. Just as in Poland and other countries, there is a electrification wave going on. And just to put that in perspective, E.ON has about 20% of the local grid in Sweden. And currently we have a pipeline of connection requests only in the E.ON grid, which exceeds 2 times the Swedish peak load on a cold winter day. So there is a massive pressure on grid build out, which of course directly transforms into the importance of a proper regulation. On top of this, we also have a few other macro things going on this year. First of all, we have a national election for the parliament this fall, which always puts some additional pressure on certain areas. And after a cold winter, energy is really high up on the politicians' agenda, which then, of course, also reflects back to regulation and energy production. Yes, and this in this context, I'll start to say that our NRA is just now in the middle of drafting our new regulatory scheme. So there is a lot of work going on. So what we are referring to here when looking forward is actually something that is not finalized or written yet. So there will be some uncertainties as we don't know how the final model looks like. But nevertheless, I think it's important that we address especially these topics we have here and the two ones that we have chosen for Sweden. And it will be some kind of a floating transition between the long-term predictability and the possibility of having a sufficient cash flow, as they are very much linked together as all the other topics here as well. So I think we can jump on to the next slide and start by having a bit of a history lesson. We are on our way into our fifth regulatory period, and fifth is calculated from 2012, even though we were deregulated in '96. But that's when we had the last major shift on regulatory regime. We normally say that we have had 8 major shifts in how the regulatory model is set up since 1996. And that, of course, looking at the title of this slide with the long-term predictability, doesn't really go hand in hand. If you change too often, especially when it comes to regulation of an industry that do have investment cycles of 50 plus years for some of the assets, it puts some pressure on how to handle things. Unfortunately, many of these changes in the regulatory framework has ended up in recurring legal processes between the NRA and the DSO. And that, of course, on top of the changed model, also adds some uncertainty and unpredictability among the DSOs and also among investors to DSOs. And in the end, also it comes back to how the tariffs are set towards our customers. A jumpy regulatory model will, of course, then also be reflected in an uncertainty and volatility in the tariff setting, which really no one of us benefits from, especially not the customers in the end. But as I said, we are now the NRA is now in the process of reshaping the model. And on the right-hand side, you see the dashed lines. They correspond to areas where the regulator aimed to do major differences compared to the model that we have at this point in time. And just in brief, one can say that number one here with the regulatory asset base, and that's basically a shift in how all our assets are valued from 2028 and onwards. Historically, we have had norm codes, and looking forward, we will go to a model having acquisition values instead. It's a shift that one can do. It's important though how one does that shift. And then the never-ending WACC question, as I've seen in many of the other countries as well. That's also one of the things where we today have a forward-looking WACC methodology, but the NRA now wants to shift to a backward-looking methodology, where we as the industry, we make investment decisions looking forward, not looking backward. So we think that the forward-looking model is much more fit for purpose. There's also changes in how connection fees should be treated in the regulatory model. And yeah, also on basically all other parts of the regulatory framework. One big shift is that we will, from today, we have efficiency requirement on our control, which is applied on our controllable OpEx. Whereas in the future model, we see that the regulator wants to go to a TOTEX incentive or TOTEX adjustment instead. And yeah, just to be clear on one thing, it's we are not against changes in the regulatory regime. We think that's sound and solid, and one should review and tailor a model so that it's fit for purpose. And especially when we see all the changes that we have in society, and also driven by electrification and sustainability efforts, there is of course a need to review and adopt a model. But we think that it has to be done with care, and perhaps not look at all parts of the model at once, but do it stepwise and do with some kind of slow implementation, just to keep the long-term predictability. Nevertheless, the new period starts in 2028, and we'll see how the model looks when we close in on it. And we do believe that the regulator will present the details about the regulation later on this year. So perhaps end of Q3, beginning of Q4. So that's when we will see how it actually turns out. We do have, and that's also important to mention, we do have a good dialogue with the regulator, where we meet regularly in many different constellations, including stakeholders also from the customer side and from the academia, to discuss on how a future regulatory model could look like, and how it can be set up so that it actually promotes electrification, and at the same time puts a pressure on the DSOs to actually be efficient. But yeah, all these shifts in regime does of course put some uncertainty into the business, which might not be wanted or desired when we are in this enormous electrification wave. I think we can jump one slide ahead. Yes. And even though we've had all these changes and legal disputes historically, we have in the end had a model which has been functioning. It's been well functioning, and it's also been developed through these legal disputes. It has developed in a way so that it becomes more predictable than it was in the beginning. And that in the end has also given us a reasonable capital cost coverage and returns, and thereby also a relatively stable cash flow. And through that also set us in a position where investors and other stakeholders actually have been willing to lend money or invest into Swedish DSOs. So we're coming from a period with even though instability in how the model looks like, we've always ended up with a reasonable outcome in the end. And then just to sum this up, as I said in the beginning here, that yeah, all the changes that now are on the table might induce a risk for a less attractive financing terms, and thereby also less stability in the cash flows. And I think in the end, it's very important that all parts of the regulatory framework can stand on their own theory and legs. But what matters the most in the bottom end is that actually the model as a whole works. There will always be parts where it is slightly better or slightly worse, but in the end it has to be balanced and drive the correct behaviors from the DSOs, and allowing us to do the investments needed in order to actually keep the competitiveness and in the end also the affordability of the customers. So it needs to be a balanced pressure. And by that, I think I'm through. Do you have any questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. I see one question in the Q&A. I will address it to you from Maria Adelaide. She says, well, what would be the justification or reason of the Swedish NRA to use a backward-looking WACC rather than forward-looking? Of course, in your opinion, we don't have, I guess, the Swedish regulator with us, who might know better.
No, but it's a good question, and it is one of the questions where we see things differently between the DSOs and the regulator. And as I said, from a DSO perspective, we look forward when we do investments, thus meaning that our WACC should be forward-looking according to us as DSOs. And if I then try to put on the regulator hat, they look more on for our asset base is indexed with the true outcome of today a construction index and moving forward with the inflation index. So we will have a real system for the RAB, so it will be indexed, and then they want to match the inflation used in our real WACC system with the inflation which is actually used to index the RAB. So that's how they see it. That's why they want to look backward on the actual values, whereas we do investments on predictions moving forward. So that's where our differences appear.
Okay, and I've seen Osmo, you raised your hand by mistake or no? Okay, please.
No, I have a question. I thought it would be easier to just ask it. I read the first draft of this Swedish regulation, and I noticed that the WACC was very low, like below 2%. Has that been improved or any changes? I noticed that that in the third or fourth quarter you will see the final results. But what's your recent news of this WACC?
Good question. I'd say that on the official documentation, the latest published data from the regulator, their intended WACC model, it is a 8-year backward-looking one, which then would, as you address, be somewhere below 2% in a real system, which we believe is incredibly low and non-reasonably low. The reason why it becomes so low when looking at these 8-year period, as they have addressed in their intention at least, is that you get a lot of extreme years with the COVID and the Ukrainian war, putting the interest low and the inflation high, which basically makes the WACC go down super low. This is the WACC question is of course the main topic in the discussions with the NRA, but I do not have any other official statements from the regulator saying that say something else than what they published in October.
Okay, thank you very much. And just before passing the floor to Charles for the closing, I would like to thank you all our speakers. And I think all of you, 7 countries, have raised the need, the necessity for this investments, which at a scale which has not been done in the past years due to the needs. Only just Jonathan mentioned that only Aeon grids have connections requests which exceed 2 times their capacity. And they are not the only ones. We see similar cases in many DSOs. And please, Charles, the floor is yours for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Carmen. And indeed, first thing I would like to do as well is to thank all of our speakers today. I think it's worth saying individually again, Oliver Lockengeisser from Energinet Steiermark, Osmo Sirto from Helen, Lasse Kontinen from Caruna, Joe Lawler from ESB Networks, Giacomo Maggiore from A2A Unireti, Riccardo Abate from Enel Grids, Carolina Boasac Lasota from Energo Operator, Santiago Gallego from IDEA, supported by Irene Bartol from SMA, and Jonathan Hallinder from E.ON. Thank you to all of you. I think you'll see there the QR code for the paper. Many people from these companies and others contributed to the paper, from members from EDSO and GEODE, from many DSOs, and as well the Secretariat staff also contributed to the paper. So I think thanks to everyone who contributed, and also we appreciate the interaction from all of you today who've asked questions, and certainly our continued engagement as well with regulators, with stakeholders, and so thank you for all of that. Unless there are other general questions, which I don't see in the Q&A, I think it just would conclude then by saying that the theme I saw today is that where regulation is closer to best practices on multiple principles, we obtain lower cost investment, we obtain innovation to benefit consumers. At the same time, given the importance of electricity sector to increasing European security of supply, which I think now, if we look at the recent events in the news, is really more important than ever, and really it really underlines the importance of how the electricity sector increases European security of supply, and how dependence on fossil fuels imported, it does contribute to risks, economic and other. The kind of investments we need to have a more secure and independent electricity system that underlies Europe's economy is all the more important. And so the importance of this regulation to get that investment, at low cost is essential. I think as well, we will continue to reach for our climate goals, which are in sync with our security of supply goals. And together, again, this kind of investment that we need at low cost through best regulatory principles will really achieve that. I think as well as businesses, as DSOs, of course, we have to compete with other sectors for supply, for employees, etc. And so a fair deal for us as businesses, a fair deal for consumers, to meet the customer's goals, which is always must be in focus, and indeed society's goals, I think is where this all leads. So behind all this complex regulation, we get to this to get to those essential goals, and must keep them in mind, and why we're always trying to strive for improved regulation that helps us to achieve those goals. So with that, I thank again everyone. Thank you for attending today. We had over 100 people online at least at one point, and wish all of you all the best for the rest of your Friday and a good weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.